NRI now returned to India, written and narrated by Amar Vyas.
Chapter 1. It's only for an year. At each of the several dozen departure gates at the O'Hare Airport in Chicago, the passengers form a queue to board their respective planes. There's no rush, no pushing, and no yelling. But at one particular gate, a huge crowd forms at the farthest side from where it tapers towards a single entry point. One can practically witness a funnel in action. This is the departure gate for the Air India flights to India. There is chaos, but things finally fall in place. A first-timer may experience a sense of shock and disbelief. For the repeat travelers, or for those who have stayed away from Bharat Mata or Mother India for a very long time, this is a reintroduction to how things generally work in India. I was simply getting reintroduced. My journey from Chicago had begun with unexpected glitches. Once the boarding had completed, the main door of the aircraft would not close. This delayed the takeoff by an hour. Next, a malfunction in the plane's autopilot system took up another 30 minutes. By then, the countless Gujju uncles and aunties had started munching on their khakras and theplas. The aroma of the food filled the aircraft cabin in no time. The family next to me offered me some of these munchies, but I smilingly refused. A large Punjabi family near the rear of the aircraft had begun chatting in loud and excited tones. They were talking about a wedding that was going to take place in Amritsar in a couple of days. I could hear 7 or 8 different languages all around me. I was in a potpourri, no, a bhelpuri of cultures. Someone had once told me that there are only 2 places in the world where one can hear so many languages and witness a mix of cultures in a few hundred square feet of space. One of them is the New York City subway. The other is an Air India flight. I was definitely on the latter. The plane finally took off 2 hours beyond the scheduled departure time. Things settled down and I was thankful for a period of quiet till we reached somewhere above the Atlantic Ocean. And that's when the live performances by the Wailing Babies began. The opening act was started by a little one who was just 2 rows behind me, and she was wrapped in pink. She was shortly accompanied by the howling of a pair of twins who were seated somewhere on the far side of the plane. This created a stereo effect. Before I knew it, 2 more wailers from the front of the plane completed the chorus. This led to a home theater effect. Much to my irritation, the live show went on and on and on. As if this was not enough, someone in the row behind me kept walking up and down the aisle. She wanted to use the loo, but all of them were occupied. Must be the theplas, I said to myself. The scene around me was chaotic, and yet it seemed so familiar. I decided that sleep was my only escape, and I took the route I preferred the most on long international flights. 2 shots of whiskey is the best way to enjoy a sound, relaxing sleep. A helpful stewardess on a Lufthansa flight had once told me, "Try it if you like. I have seen passengers dive into a peaceful sleep for hours." I had followed her advice shortly after the flight had taken off from Frankfurt, only to wake up after the plane had landed in New York. It was the best flight I had ever been on. But this time around, I had a very disturbed sleep. And all along, a voice within me kept asking me, "Why are you on a one-way flight to India?" I thought I had an answer, but that was far from the truth. The following Monday, I was going to start my new job in India. I was leaving behind a familiar lifestyle and heading into the unknown. Even the most irrational person would have thought that I was being foolhardy. In early 2008, many members of the Indian diaspora, also known as non-resident Indians or NRIs, had started relocating to India in large numbers. Many of them were forced to do so because of the economic slowdown in Europe and North America. Only a handful had moved back by choice. Many people in India felt that the NRIs only returned to India when they could not make it big abroad, or because they had been given the boot. In other words, many thought that it was only the losers who came back. A friend of mine had sent me a news article that read, "The green pastures of the West are not so green anymore for many NRIs. India is witnessing the return of more and more professionals due to challenges such as job loss or visa issues." The article was dated September 2007, 1 year before the collapse of the Lehman Brothers. My friend's message was clear. I should not return to India. "Stay put in Chicago," a second friend had said. My cousins Lalit and Shashi had also moved to India in the past few years. Both of them had warned me, "Returning to India requires a lot of planning. Don't make an impulsive decision." But somehow, my plans made perfect sense to me. I had merely put my future on pause mode. I planned to spend a year in India and then return to my life abroad. For the next year, I would get to spend time with Ai and Baba, reconnect with friends and family, and understand what it takes to work in India. It all seemed pretty simple and logical. To me, this move was like a pilot project. That is, trying out an idea before a full-scale launch. Any engineer or scientist would be able to relate to it. Retailers do a soft launch of their stores before the grand opening. They do so to make sure that all the systems are up and running. Software developers release work-in-progress versions of their product before the final release. They call it beta testing. We all learn by trial and error, I kept telling myself. Unfortunately, I would learn later that my trial was full of errors. Air India announces the arrival of its flight AI-126 to Mumbai. The stewardess spoke in a language that remotely resembled English. I was waking up from a disturbed sleep and was not yet coherent. Traveling on a 16-hour flight had taken its toll. I woke up wondering, what am I doing here? मुंबई के छत्रपति शिवाजी अंतर्राष्ट्रीय हवाई अड्डे पे आपका स्वागत है. The announcement was made in Hindi this time. By now, I was a little more alert. I was home. Well, almost. Home was nearly 4 hours away in Pune. The officer at the immigration counter looked irritated. I figured he was in a foul mood because he had to work this late night shift, which was the busiest time for international flight arrivals in Mumbai. I looked at his name tag. It read Nitin More. Another Marathi Manus. I approached him and I said, "Namaskar." "Passport, please," he barked. I was to learn later that in an office environment or a social gathering, Marathi folks never speak to each other in Marathi. The obligatory language of communication is English. I handed him my passport. After scanning a few pages, he asked, "You were in India last month. Are you here for work or vacation this time?" I told him excitedly, "I'm going to work in India. My work starts on Monday." He gave me a look of disapproval and said under his breath, "Ek aur aa gaya." As far as I knew, as an Indian citizen, there was no restriction on me to work in India. So why did he remark that another one is back? I had been asked these types of questions every time I returned to the United States. The immigration officers there would ask me, "How long would you be staying here? Who's your employer? Where would you be staying?" "You don't know how to fill this form? You did not write the date." Mr. More's words broke my chain of thought. "It is either the 15th or 16th of March or somewhere in between," I said. "Go and tell this to someone else," he barked again. "I have no idea because I'm not wearing a watch," I replied. "Even mobile phones can tell the date and time. Today's the 16th. He had a valid point. but I had returned my BlackBerry last week and I planned to buy a new phone in India. It was also evident by now that Mr. More was not a big fan of small talk, nor was he a man of reason. Okay, thanks, I said finally, and entered the date as March 16th, 2008. I did not realize at that time that March 16th would carry a special meaning in my life. Half an hour later, as I headed towards the exit with my bags in tow, I noticed a sign which said, "Welcome to India." However, my true welcome was yet to happen. I waited for a taxi. Once outside the airport terminal, I waited for a taxi that would take me on the last leg on my journey. The taxi service had sent an elderly Sardarji who held a placard bearing my name. "Namaste, sir. I will take you to Pune. Please let me take your bags," he said. Considering his age, I told him, "It's okay, let me handle it," and loaded the bags in the cab. The silver and blue cab seemed to groan every time the driver stepped on the gas. "How old is this car?" I asked. 3 years old, Haji, but you know how roads in India are. And the traffic, of course. In other words, he was implying that there was nothing wrong with his taxi. I made a mental note that my car needed to be both tough and sturdy, and looking at how others were driving, preferably one that was built like a tank. The taxi snaked through Dharavi, then on to Sion, and finally towards Chembur. "ये देखो, हर जगह क्रेन घूम रही है. ऐसा लगता है कि जैसे पूरा शहर फिर से बना रहे हैं." Cranes were moving even at this late an hour, and the bright lighting had lit up the normally dull Mumbai skyline. I was impressed by the driver's keen observation. The city did resemble a giant construction site. The car slowed down and came to a halt as we approached the toll booth for crossing the Thane Creek Bridge. Some 5 minutes later, we had reached Vashi. By now, the slow hum of the engine had begun to hypnotize me. I had almost fallen asleep when a loud thud and a jerk woke me up. "Accident ho gaya ji," the Sardarji driver said. "Are you okay?" I asked him. "मैं ठीक हूं, लेकिन गड्डी का हेडलाइट टूट गया. रात को ऐसे चला नहीं सकता. पुलिस पकड़ लेगी. मैं दूसरी गड्डी मंगाता हूं." The accident was a multi-car pile-up somewhere between Vashi and Belapur. I guess we were traveling at about 40 kilometers an hour when it had occurred. By the time I had stepped out of the taxi, more than half the cars involved in the accident had already left the scene. A few were being pushed to the side of the road. There were no injuries, only bruised egos. Overall, it did not look like a cause for worry. My taxi was hit from the front and back, and the only damage to the vehicle was a broken headlight. But the Sardarji driver did not want to drive the car in the night with a single functional headlight, so he had called for a replacement cab. An hour later, the replacement car arrived and we were on our way again. I was impressed with the Tata Indica. It was a car that was truly built for the Indian roads. I had found my battle tank. I reached my home in Pune in time for breakfast. As soon as I saw me, like all doting mothers, she declared that I had become anorexic. "You need to eat more. From now on, I will make sure that you eat properly," she said. What I really needed at that time was a hot shower. But there was a power failure which meant that there was no hot water. The idea of a cold bath did not sound very appealing, so I opted to grab a bite instead. I had barely managed to eat a slice of bread when I threw up. I decided to take that shower after all. In the evening, I went to Suman Auntie's place to meet Shashi. Suman Auntie is a large and a gregarious person. Even strangers take a liking to her in a very short period of time. She has a tremendous sense of humor and she is an excellent cook. Her late husband, Milind Kaka, was a professor at Mumbai University. He had planned to spend his retired life in Pune. He used to tell us, "Pune is known as a pensioner's paradise." Unfortunately, he was called upon to retire in a different paradise as soon as they had moved out of Mumbai. As I sipped the super sweet tea, Suman auntie asked me the usual set of questions that I would have to face several times in the coming days. How was your flight? What time did you reach home? I was hardly in a mood for a conversation of this kind, but I told her about the car accident. You should go and pray in the Hanuman temple on Poud Road, she said. You were saved because he was there to protect you. This Hanuman temple on Poud Road would form an integral part of my Saturday evenings in the coming months. I was hoping that Shashi would show up soon. He was my friend, philosopher, and guide. He was my biggest critic. He was also the big brother that I never had. As always, he had told me not to act in haste and move to India. And like always, I had not listened to him. Shashi arrived half an hour later, carrying his 1-year-old daughter. Before I could speak, he said, I got to change her diaper. Wait a minute. I watched in amazement as he literally finished the job in less than a minute. I had always believed that Shashi possessed only one skill, namely opening cans of beer. Changing diapers was very much unlike him. But I had also heard that fatherhood changes people, and Shashi's act had just proved it. Welcome back, Shashi said finally as he hugged me. Almost sounded like he was saying, welcome to the jungle. His words brought me back to reality. You look different. Good, I said. Shashi had gained a few kilos. He looked underslept and his hair had grayed. He was a far cry from the Shashi I knew. Yup, he replied. He had always been a man of few words. I could sense that he was not in a mood to talk and a drink was out of question. I tried to recall what a character Shashi used to be. It was the summer of 2004 and we had met at Lalit's place for a cousin's reunion. Lalit was the eldest amongst us. He lived in St. Louis and worked with the leading brewer in town. This also meant that there would be an almost unrestricted supply of beer at his house. Lalit was moving back to Pune at that time and he needed help with the move. I had driven down from Chicago while Shashi had flown from Atlanta. Instead of helping Lalit, we had finished 24 cans of beer in a couple of hours' time and we were wasted. Around midnight, Shashi wanted to smoke a cigar, so the two of us had stepped out. As he lit up the cigar, he had asked me about my work. By the time I could reply to his question, we had reached the swimming pool. I want to go for a swim, Shashi had declared. Before I could stop him, he had stripped down to his underwear and dived into the pool. The cigar was still in his mouth. A few minutes later, he had stepped out of the pool in the buff. My underwear got wet, so I put it to dry, he said, pointing to the black fabric that hung on the fence. By now, I was worried that someone would call the police, so we made a hasty retreat to Lalit's apartment. I managed to collect his clothes in the process. On our way back, Shashi shouted, "This cigar is wet. I cannot smoke it." It was obviously time for him to go to bed. I was thankful that we didn't get arrested that night. The hum of the air conditioning from the neighboring homes had drowned the ruckus that Shashi was creating. Somehow he had managed to wake up at dawn and collected his underwear from the poolside. He told me later, "I didn't want to leave any evidence." But today I could see that the Shashi I knew had changed. Rather, lots of things had changed about him. Before going to bed, I tried to watch TV but could not figure out why the hosts on every channel would first say something in English and follow it up by its Hindi version. Please stay back while we take this short break. Milte hain break ke baad. An overly made up and a seemingly bubbly young girl spoke on some channel. Almost immediately, a loud jingle of a commercial began. "What crap," I shouted. "Why do they say the same thing in two languages?" I suggested, "Maybe they speak in English to cater to the South Indians." Her point was practically irrelevant. There were more regional language TV channels than Hindi, and the non-Hindi speakers would naturally prefer to watch TV in their language. But I was hardly in the mood to argue with her and turned the TV off. Tomorrow was going to be my first day at work and I needed to rest. As is, I was not happy to learn that the sofa in the living room was going to be my bed for the next several nights. I and Baba like to carry their worldly possessions with them wherever they went. As a result, the bedrooms were overflowing with boxes and furniture, and there was hardly any space left for me to sleep. As I lay on the uncomfortable sofa, the reality hit me. I was at home in Pune. All my efforts and anxieties over the past several days had finally paid off. As I wondered if things would work out as planned, I consoled myself by saying, "It's only for a year."
Thank you for listening to NRI Now Return to India by Amar Vyas. To learn more about Amar, you can visit his website amarvyas.in, or to check out this book on Amazon, visit Amar's Amazon author page. The links will be added in the show notes.